the future of investing is not more deep research and maybe not more using AI. So in today's world where data and information is widely accessible, and now with AI infinitely able to compute all the data available and crunch it in real time, the future of investing may not be just by summarizing all the data available. I'm Eddie from Toko Alpha Mind, and in this video, we are going to see why AI is not the only answer to investing and why just using more deep research and more information is not going to really help you be successful as an investor. First, let's try to understand what is deep research, what it does, and why this is not really the answer to investing. So first of all, when we are talking about deep research, we are talking about all the functionality that you can find in Gemini, in Grok, or in ChatGPT that is actually performing some research like on the internet about the prompt that you are giving to the tool. And so I'm sure that you're all familiar with LLM at the moment. And so the point with deep research is that it's kind of agentic in a way where so the LLM itself is given the tools to actually go into the web and try to search for information. So why it is deep research is because those reasoning models, they are able to actually build plans and search information according to this plan, and this is why it comes to having a deep research. So the deep research is actually done into multiple steps, and this is what you can see on the screen when you look at the different steps that the LLM is actually doing. So basically, this is mimicking what a human would do by going into different websites and based on the information that is finding on this website, updating his plan and trying to find new information and so on and so on. And so basically, based on the prompt that you are giving, then the deep research model is going to actually give you some results based on all the information he has been able to find on the internet. And so this is kind of a very powerful tool to actually summarize information. And especially if you combine that with Notebook LM, for example, you can have pretty powerful AI tool to actually summarize information and to have a much better understanding very quickly of all the new companies that you've never heard about or that you have never researched actually yourself. But like all LLMs, so these deep research tools, they are only very good at summarizing current information. When you want to actually infer information into the future, and that's your job as an investor, then deep research is not going to help you very much. And I think this is one key thing that a lot of people are kind of forgetting about these tools, is that the tool itself is here to help you find information much more quickly and to help you understand the company that you are researching much more quickly. Definitely deep research is going to help you in here. But the truth of the matter is your job as an investor is to actually infer the future, to understand what is going to happen after the data that you are seeing in your deep research. And so that work today is not done by any AI tool because this is the work of the human, meaning that the LLMs that we are today are based and working on information that you are providing them. And so the information that you have to provide them, like you have to make them by yourself because no one is actually doing it for you. Another issue with the deep research and LLM in general is that they are summarizing tools. And by summarizing, it's very difficult to have a contrarian approach. So what you end up usually is by having a consensus of all the different opinions that you are seeing on the internet. And I think that's the fundamental problem with those deep research, is that they're very good at finding information, but very bad at actually building a thesis, which is actually contrarian. So most people, they use this tool to actually get quickly on pace on some companies. And I think that this is a fantastic tool to actually do that, gives you all the financial numbers, explain you what are the competitive advantages of the company, what is the business. And I think that every investor should try to use them because this is how you're going to improve and accelerate your research work. Having said that, this is not what is going to give you an edge. Indeed, so just having deep research or just having more deep research or more capacity to compute is not going to give you an edge. First, because everybody has access to this deep research today. So hedge funds, they have that, or they have been having that for like decades now. So the ability to have very deep research. Then the data that these deep research tools are actually working are just publicly available data, just that they compute and summarize it much more quickly than a human could do. But the real alpha and the real advantage that those hedge funds have is that they have access to alternative data sets and alternative data that you don't have. And so The real actually edge is not on the computing tool and the tool itself, but on the data underlying. And so if you don't have access to the kind of information that the hedge fund have, for example, well, it could be have access to the broker itself to understand like if there are big clients actually having some big orders on some names, and also to have access directly to the management of the different teams. So if you don't have that, then it will be very difficult to still have an edge, even if you have deep research. So we're living in a world where information is widely available and compute is now widely available as well. So what you need is not more information, because all the data that you have is actually widely accessible, and you can find pretty much everything that you need at a fair level to actually compete in this market. Well, the reality is that some have data that you don't have, but you won't have anyway. So your advantage is not going to come from having more data, more information. So you have to find something else. So more information is not going to be your edge. So I think it's pointless to try to find new ways to have more efficient tools in terms of deep research, having like Perplexity, for example, because the real success in investing is not going to come from more information, especially if you're a retail trader or a retail investor. Another aspect on information that you will never be able to compete is about speed of processing information. So yes, you might be able to access like tools like deep research, for example, but definitely you will not be able to compute fast enough to actually get an edge in terms of speed. So what you need to have is an edge in terms of understanding of what's going on. And so this is not going to come from having more information available that is also available to all the other players. So you have to work more on your human understanding, and this is where the edge is going to come. Before we deep dive into understanding what is human understanding, well, the first point that you still have to keep in mind, and we have seen that many times in other videos, is that investing is about narrative. So basically, the stock market itself is about narrative and what all the players, they are agreeing in terms of consensus on a single stock. And so that's where you will have an edge, because you will come with a different narrative than the market. And this is where you can actually outperform, or this is also how you can have massive upside. So this is being contrarian, or this is just being a little bit more bullish or a little bit more bearish than other players. But anyway, the point is that you should have a different or slightly different narrative than the whole market if you want to have different results. And so from this observation, your edge is going to come to have a better understanding of the narrative and a better understanding of how it will change in the future. So that's your job as an investor. Understand how the narrative is going to change in the future. So the narrative can change because the facts change, and the narrative can change just because the sentiment is changing. But that's not the point. The point is that the narrative will change in the future, and you need to understand how it's going to change in order to benefit from the change. So we've seen that information and deep research is not going to be your edge. So what is your edge actually in this new AI era? So your edge is going to be you being a human and being able to infer what is supposed to happen and to take accountability for it. So, which means that your job as an investor is based on all the information and all the compute and all the deep research that you can find. So based on the information we have today, to be able to infer what is going to happen tomorrow and why the current consensus is actually not correct. And what is interesting is that the consensus you have today might actually change the narrative in the same way that you are actually forecasting. And so, which means that what you need to be is actually be in advance. So to actually play in advance of the market, to try to actually be one of the first and be contrarian, meaning that not to actually focus on too much of what people think at the moment, but what people will think tomorrow, or at least in aggregate, because obviously you will never be the only one having the contrarian thesis. A lot of people. And sometimes you will be right, sometimes you will be wrong. But your job is to be able to construct this thesis, construct based on your experience, based on your human judgment, a thesis and how a narrative is going to develop and how the figures and the fundamentals are going to develop to actually support your thesis. And so that's how you're going to make money in the stock market, and that's how you're going to actually thrive in this AI era. not by trying to get the most compute and the most summarization as possible from tools like deep research. So if you're still interested in other analysis and investing wisdom like this one, please check my other video, please subscribe, and I see you in another one. Bye.